What is the smallest amount of power you've ever seen someone abuse? I was at a completely empty airport and only needed to identify myself before I could pick up my luggage. There was no queue, so I skipped the line. That butthole at the desk made me walk back and compelled me to zigzag all around the fences where nobody was standing. Afterwards, he and a colleague just laughed at me because he knew that he could use his power like that. Ugh. Should have pulled a Shrek and just walked right up the middle. I had a co-worker who cheated when she played games with 3-year-olds. When the kids called her out on it, she would deny it and say that she was a teacher and whatever she did was allowed in the game. Her entire self-esteem seemed to be dependent on winning games designed for preschoolers. I feel like an Adam Sandler character would tell her to have some standards. When people used to quit at my old company, I'd let them click the mouse button to deactivate their AD account on the last day. Everyone loved it because it was a single act that meant closure. Never expected something positive here. We had a pizza party for people who completed a project at work. I was training a new guy and brought leftovers, so I wasn't interested in pizza. The new guy was about to take lunch and I told him if he wanted a couple slices of pizza he could have mine. LOL. The guy who ran the pizza party said no way even after explaining to him I wasn't eating, and he hid the leftover pizza in his office. Only people who worked on this project are allowed to eat the pizza. I went into his office and grabbed it and gave it to my guy. Not all heroes wear capes. A teacher in high school tried to send me to the office for having an electronic device out in the hallway. The device was medical equipment, and after I explained that to him, he told me he didn't care because I'd still broken a school rule. Needless to say, I didn't get in trouble. A bit of context. This all took place before school even started, and there were plenty of kids waiting in the halls for class to start. I'm diabetic, so I was using my insulin pump when this teacher walked past. I didn't end up going to the office because my awesome broadcasting teacher heard the other teacher shouting in the hallway and came out to see what was going on. I did a lot of work for my broadcasting teacher before and after school, so he knew me pretty well. He didn't even wait to find out what was going on before he told the guy to stop shouting and leave me alone. And since the butthole teacher only picked on students, he left without another word. No repercussions. I worked at a small retail store with a manager, an assistant manager, and me, the employee. The manager loved me. The assistant manager loved me some days and hated me others. On day when the assistant manager was in a particularly hateful mood, she threatened to recommend to the manager that I be fired. I said, "Why? The manager loves me and I'm a good, reliable worker. She would never fire me." And she said, "Yeah, I know she wouldn't, but as assistant manager, I have the power to recommend you get fired." I probably would have started laughing uncontrollably at that point. Row. This guy I work with was in charge of a one-time only funding project. This dude made people jump through an insane amount of hoops and made it a huge freaking deal to get that money. He just had to pick someone, which should have taken 1 hour of thoughtful review of people's abstracts. That wasn't good enough. He was accepting bribes. He was accepting favors. He made people rewrite abstracts, or he would tell their director that their abstracts weren't good enough. He freaking hired a temp worker to be his secretary. It was a freaking crap show for $1,000. He was demoted so fast, BTW. At least he got demoted ASAP. That's got to be satisfying. My high school did an end of year celebration on campus. During school time, it was just the graduating year and the year below us, so it wasn't that disruptive. But to prevent it getting out of control, the school hired 4 security guards. One of them decided to lock all the gates, and at the end of the day, we couldn't leave unless we exited through the office. I'd say there were around 700 students, and he just refused to let us leave until another security guard had to fight through the crowd to let him know he was being a dong. He unlocked the gate I was at and then unlocked the others. Cool. Sounds like a great way to have lots of kids die in a crowd crush or a fire. Worked at the concession stands at the beach one summer. Whenever responsibilities were given out of who was supposed to do what for that day, one of my co-workers would suck up to the supervisors so that they would give him the clipboard for him to decide who did what. Naturally, he never assigned himself anything. After handing out the jobs, he'd go and sit in the little office inside the stand and do nothing while the rest of us worked. One time he assigned me the job of cleaning the boardwalk. I was to take a broom and dustpan and walk the entire length of the boardwalk looking for litter to sweep up. The idiot didn't know that the cleaning of the boardwalk wasn't the responsibility of us concession stand workers. That job belonged to the workers employed by the state. We concession stand workers were responsible for the cleanliness of only the small cement patio area directly in the front of our stand, not the boardwalk too. I took advantage of his stupidity and I walked down the boardwalk long enough to be out of sight of my concession stand and sat down on a bench for a couple hours or so, resting and relaxing while he was doing the same in the office. When working fast food I was told to scrub the bathroom floors. It was already really clean so it didn't take long. I went back up front and before I could say anything my supervisor sent me back to do a better job. Went back, locked doors, and played on my phone for over half an hour. Later I was told that the bathroom looked really great. Easiest hour of my time while working there. I used to volunteer at a local library when I was in high school. Every year they had a book sale to help raise money for events. $0.25 for paperbacks and $0.50 for hardbacks. I was also working retail at this time so I decided being cashier would be pretty appropriate. It was going pretty well. I kept the line moving and was used to the small talk of being at a register. The head librarian was busy organizing and she had one of the mom volunteers keep an eye on things. Not too long after she started supervising, she came over to me and told me she didn't think it was a good idea for me to be on register. I was pretty confused by this. No one had complained. There was hardly ever a wait. There was no reason for her to think I wasn't capable. I told her it was fine, that I was used to this with my part-time job. She was still visibly uneasy and insisted I help with something else. It got to the point where she was practically demanding me to go somewhere else. Not wanting to cause a scene, I went to assist elsewhere. I found out later she thought the math of calculating the totals was too hard for children to be responsible for. Seriously? I was in AP Calc and she didn't think I could add $0.25 and $0.50 increments? The best part of it all was that my mom went to the book sale a few years after and the few years after and the few years after she had a cheat sheet for adding up the book totals. I'm still bitter. She thought it was as hard doing math for everybody as it is for her. Feel pity, not anger. The restaurant I used to work at required male employees to shave before a shift. It was always understood that if you were working a double you weren't shaving before the second shift. A low-level manager wanted Eric to go home and shave before his night shift. Eric got stuck with a table that wouldn't leave and he didn't have enough time. The manager made him shave with a random disposable razor that they had in the back office. They didn't even have shaving cream. In elementary school, I got sent to the office for recess for misbehaving. While I was sitting there, the secretary asked how I was enjoying missing recess. I said, it's okay, so she made me come back the following day because I didn't hate it enough. At my friend's job they rent out motorized scooters to people with mobility issues. At least once every few months, my friend gets purposefully run into or over by some old fart with an overinflated sense of their own power and worth because they've got a vehicle and she's wearing a uniform and therefore they're allowed to abuse her. My husband used to work in a nursing home, and this is an actual thing with old people who aren't exactly in their right minds anymore. More than one of the patients had to have their scooter taken away because they would get angry at staff and run them over or trap them against walls or in corners. Those folks just sound like jackasses, though. Wanted to relocate with my cool little rabbit. Bought a ticket and confirmed with the airline beforehand. Ticket had a comment that said, authorized to travel with a rabbit in the cargo hold, paid extra. On the day of my flight, after security checks, some lady who's a chief service officer, which basically was a 50-year-old flight attendant, said we're not flying. The rabbit will escape and chew electrical wiring and kill us all, apparently. Also, she had no superior and reported to no one. It took lots of tears from my lots of shouting from me, and 1 hour to get her to get special approval from the captain. I don't think I could ever take the little guy back now. Stuck in Germany for a few more years. That lady made the day of starting a new life extremely traumatic. Frick you, Hannah, wherever you are. In my AP government class in high school we had a 2-week mock congress. The class was divided into two sides, Republican and Democrat, and they each had to purpose a bill to our mock subcommittee. I was named the chairman of the subcommittee. One of the leader of the Republicans, Danny, shared the same first period with me. Our first period teacher was really strict about being late, but if someone in the class said that you showed up and went to the bathroom, she would not mark you late. So the first thing I did was make an alliance with Danny. He covered for my lateness and I pushed his bill through the subcommittee, and we learned about real politics. Worked with someone at a school club, and a person on the same level as me refused to let children talk when they came up to the counter to get their food. No talking to staff or kids. Absurd. My head lunch lady, out of perhaps 7 or 8, big school, gave kids alternatives to fries. I asked around whose bright idea a baked potato was to say thanks, and she positively beamed at me. People treating people like people shouldn't be so freaking hard. My manager. She's not exactly high level. She's one promotion above me. She has ruined my views of the company I work at and picked on my work to the point where I'd now consider it workplace bullying. I'm handing in my notice next week. During a meeting with the general manager and HR, I'm going to drop her in crap. When I was first starting my job, there was this prick who worked in the office who told me he was a supervisor. He would order me around and give me extra work on top of the work I'm trying to do and give me crap later for not having it all done. He'd make me do unsafe stuff and working in areas I haven't been officially trained in. Someone let it slip that he's just an office clerk and not a supervisor. So the next time he walked up to me giving me extra work, I told him to get a real supervisor to okay it, and he paused, looked at me, took the paperwork back and went back to the office. Didn't see him for the rest of that day. My kids were quite little, and I was giving them turns each day of being in charge of cleaning the living room to exercise their leadership skills. When it was my son's turn, I had left them alone for a while and came back to the girls complaining that he was ordering them to punch each other. Once my sister and I were home alone, the phone rang and my sister answered. It's Dad. He wants you to clean the family room. He had told her to clean the family room, but she passed it to me after hanging up the phone. I fell for it though. In elementary school, everyone had the chance to be a line leader on his or her birthday. One girl was kind of socially awkward, so on her day she decided to give someone else the title. Our teacher was off because she felt disrespected by this mild change in line leadership, so she exclaimed, "If you don't want to accept the title I generously gave to you, go to Mrs. P's classroom. I'm trying to be kind to you, but you're being a brat who thinks she has the right to decide who's in charge." Then, she went off on the other girl for indecent behavior and harassment. Even though she kind of just yelled at the awkward chick, but whatever. Maybe the birthday girl shouldn't have called someone else the line leader, but the teacher took personal offense for something so trivial. Nothing will ever beat the sheer megalomania of the senior lifeguard back when I had one of my first jobs as a lifeguard, or, as he would insist on saying, junior lifeguard, at the swimming pool. This will probably get buried, but here it goes. When I was 16, I was working at a fast food restaurant in my hometown. It was connected to a gas station truck stop and had shared bathrooms. On one of my days off right after school ended, I got into a nasty longboarding accident and broke my wrist, along with some major road rash. Safe to say I shouldn't have to go into work the next day. Right? Wrong? Because I forgot to get a note from the and nobody would cover my shift. I had to go in. My sister put my hair in a ponytail, and my then boyfriend helped me put on my clothes because I couldn't do it myself. I get a ride to work because I can't drive on heavy painkillers, and they put me on register. Cool, I can do that. Kind of. Then they tell me I have to serve the food. I try, but I end up dropping quite a few things and it needs to be remade. I was almost crying from the pain of trying to do things, and my co-worker decided she was going to get me out of the way. This girl had been working there about a year longer than me and she had been helping to train me. I guess that's why she felt she could tell me what to do. Normally it's whatever, but I shouldn't have been walking very much, let alone working. This bee tells me to go clean the bathrooms. Cleaning the bathrooms with one working arm, and patches of open skin all over my body, with chemicals. Great idea. Just freaking great. I get the things needed and just push them bolly into the women's bathroom, where I find a scene from heck. The toilets were overflowing with crap. There was lipstick and other smudges all over the mirrors, and a pile of crappy toilet paper strewn about the place. I broke. I called my parents crying and asking them to come get me. I was leaving early. I couldn't do it anymore. I left all of the cleaning supplies in the bathroom, clocked out and told my manager I had to go. I couldn't clean the bathrooms and I just needed to go home and heal. She tried telling me that if I left early I was going to get written up and have some penalties. I stopped caring and just waited outside for my parents. As I was sitting on the curb I checked my pain pills to keep count and 6 were missing. So someone stole my Vicodin. Cool. After my parents finally got there and I started bawling again, I had to go back to the ER. Turns out my cast had shifted and was crushing my wrist instead of supporting it, and there was grease and salt in my open wounds on my arms and good hand. I should have filed for workers' comp for having to go back to the ER, but I didn't. Frick that job. TLDR. I was in an accident and got hurt pretty bad. Fast food place still made me go into work. They stole my painkillers and tried to get me to work a normal shift. Had to go back to the ER because of food getting into open wounds and my cast twisting wrong on my arm. Frick that B. Haley. There's a school bus driver in town that stops the bus, with the flashers going, to talk with people she knows. It doesn't matter how much traffic gets backed up behind the bus. She just talks away as if she owns the road, and to heck with the long line of cars and delays her lengthy chat sessions create. I was an elementary school teacher and no joke, one of our bus drivers got fired for stopping at a yard sale while driving kids home from school. In elementary school I had this one teacher who, when she would have to leave the classroom, she'd pick a random kid to stand at the chalkboard and watch the class. No one was allowed to talk or get up until the teacher came back. To be honest, my class was pretty rowdy, and given the chance we could get really loud, which is why the teacher didn't want us talking if she was gone. If you talked or got up, your name went on the board and you'd lose 5 minutes of recess. Then tally marks would be added if you talked or got up again, and you'd lose an additional 5 minutes. And if you got enough you'd start losing time on the next day's recess. One day she picked this one kid, we'll call him Cole. Cole gets up there and he's slowly looking back and forth between each of us. And if he thought someone was going to talk, he'd put their name on the board. They didn't have to do anything. And he'd put their name on the board and cost them 5 minutes of recess. He then offered those with their names on the board that he'd take their name off before the teacher got back if they held their breath until he said they could breathe. Psychopath. Like WTF. I had a babysitter lay out a bunch of rules including words we couldn't say. Not bad words mind you, but shoo was one of them. And I specifically remember being sent to my room without dinner for saying it. My brother ended up busting me out and we locked her out of the house. Viva la revolution. Boss went on vacation for a long weekend. Acting boss, whose only responsibility was to sign the time cards on Friday, decided to send an email to the staff outlining the changes he was going to make to the boss' existing office policies. As a senior guy, I called this acting boss and read him the riot act. The other co-workers found out, and as a result, I didn't have to pay for lunch for a month. Security guard at a community college. This guy was the definition of a rent-a-cop. Big, fat, awkward, no gun, and a whistle he was not the least bit shy about using. A girl I was hanging out with needed to go up there to turn in a form and I went with her. We got there and the parking lot was deserted. That's when we realized it was a holiday weekend, but since we had already driven up there, we went to see if the offices were open. Sure enough, the door to the administration building is unlocked, so we go in. After walking around for a bit, we realize that all the offices are closed, so we decide to cut our losses and head out. Suddenly, from the other end of the hall we hear freeze. Stop what you are doing right now. It's the tub of crap security guard who comes down and starts screaming at us like a drill sergeant, demanding answers for why we're in the building, accusing us of breaking in, and not letting us get a word in. Finally I just cut him off and said, dude, we're enrolled students and the fricking door was unlocked. If you honestly think we're here to rob the place, call the real cops, but we were already on our way out. He then yelled a couple of things about this being our only warning, etc., as we walked away from him and left. I used to work security at a college as well. Students would wander in all the time on days we were closed if someone missed a door. It's really not hard to just tell them it's closed and ask them to leave. Heck, a lot of the time they just honestly didn't know. There are way too many guards that abuse the zero power they actually have. I did a game jam, game development competition a team of strangers, and the manager that got picked for my team was the owner of some gaming startup and had launched some crappy Steam platformer, so we were supposed to be super excited to work with someone in the industry. My whole team was full of game dev students, but I've already finished school and have a job and just do these competitions for fun, so I was the only one not trying to impress him. He promised us a bunch of things, including getting music assets and graphic design from his startup employees. I had previously offered music assets that I had from a friend, but he turned them down. The game launched with no music or sound. He had us make Trello accounts and then proceeded to step back, sit in the lunch break area and contribute nothing to the game. I'm pretty sure he was just there to make an appearance and promote his startup. People were impressed with him, however, and he spent most of that time being a mini celebrity because he launched a Steam game. He showed up like the last hour of the last day and we had essentially made a completely different game than what he had originally discussed with us. With him being nowhere to be found, we decided to make numerous changes without him there. He was furious and insisted everything be changed immediately. I saved my code and walked. Our team ended up winning the competition and suddenly this guy started acting like it was his great management skills that won it for us. He tweeted games manager and a team of strangers won game jam. The tweet was used for a local news article. I called him out publicly very loudly, and one of the other guys I was working with on the team also did. He kept the tweets up and was gracious to include our names tagged in another picture. Also, they shipped our prizes to him and it took 2 months for him to get the prize to me. He kept trying to get me to meet with him, and at one point offered me a job at his startup. I turned him down every time and insisted he shipped my prize. In the industry, read, I got gullible kids to greenlight my game on Steam. Security guards whose main role is to open and close a manual gate when a car drives up to enter or leave. We have lots of those here in Jamaica. I used to play a lot of Counter-Strike. Source. I was a regular in one community and was quite good and well known. There was one member who hated me. He was just promoted to half admin, so he just had some admin abilities on the servers and forums. While playing I got naded from behind. Didn't even see it coming, so I yelled what the fudge. Didn't even say frick. He kicked me from the server for disrespectful language. I came back and asked why I was kicked. He said admins have the final say, do not question our decisions, and kicked me again. So I came back a third time and asked what did I even do, and he banned me for the day. I went to the forums to lodge a complaint and he had already put in a request to permaban me. It didn't go through. Luckily when I complained, a bunch of people who saw this came to my defense and told the real admins what happened. This guy disliked me because I was better than him, and his first day with some admin abilities he abuses the crap out of them to try to get rid of me. I was in charge of running the water fountain for my fellow kindergartners after gym one day. I was supposed to count to 5 for everyone, then stop so the next person could come up. I counted to 8 for my best friend. Oh boy, in my freshman year of college, we had a group project and of course we have someone who decides to elect themselves as a leader. Okay, cool, no issues. You don't know how to code but we can teach you. But he didn't want to. He wanted to delegate and then sit on his butt. So the 3 of us coded this flight management program while he organized meetings and set deadlines for us. He raged when we didn't finish said task within the time limit and went off on ridiculous rants. The kicker was that we had to include our names as comments on which part of the code we did and got graded on that. We continuously bugged him to learn just a bit, to at least create the front interface or the help section, but he straight out refused. Since he didn't write a single piece of code, he ended up getting a 0 in the project. He started blaming us for not putting his name on the code and went and complained to the professor. The professor laughed in his face after he heard our story. This was a CS class. We have a secretary at work. Her job is to order spare parts for clients and secretary stuff like arrange for lunch for meetings. She'll refuse to order from places that she doesn't like, and when you finally agree on things, her on her big fat friends will raid the food before the people paying for it attending the meeting get a pick. She'll even do this when clients are present. To get her to order spare parts, you have to call up another secretary who will force her to answer the phone. You then have to tell her what to do, how much she should be paying, and offer a small token of your appreciation to get her to do it. Note it's the same 10 things she always order. I could easily replace her with an Excel string. She must be freaking a director or something, cause she should have been fired years ago. I work in a company with 5 managers. Everyone is terrified of my manager. Seriously, she reminds me of Cruella de Vil. So we have a kitchen where we have lunch. We're all highly qualified professionals. There's usually about 8-10 of us sitting there having lunch. All the other managers will sit with us, but she never does. When my manager walks in, she always turns off the light, stating something like, "Why do we have the lights on? No need to be burning electricity. It has a window but no sunlight comes in, so it's pretty dark." One day she walks in and does this and notices one of the other managers sitting there and says, "Oh, other manager, I didn't notice you were here," and immediately turns the light back on. It's just one of many little things she does to intimidate people. The head RA at my freshman dorm. It was as if he accepted the job because he hated teenagers so much he wanted to ruin their lives. Since we were a freshman only dorm, there was a strict no alcohol policy, and he would stay up late waiting in the common room to catch people returning from parties drunk so he could kick them out. But that's not why I'm writing this story. He and I had beef after I asked him to get the vending machine fixed. When I told him it was broken, he said he'd call someone to get repaired. Every week I politely asked him for an update on the repair, and each week he became more and more annoyed by my inquiries. I didn't understand how it could take so long to get a repairman out, so after about 5 weeks I started investigating on my own. First I called the university to ask who fills the machines. Then I wedged my body between the snack machine and the soda machine until I found a sticker on the back with the company contact info. I called the supplier. They gave me a number for the repair request line. And 1 hour later someone was fixing the dang vending machine. I stood there chatting with the repairman waiting for the head RA to walk by. When he finally did, I pointed to the repairman with a shit-eating grin on my face and proudly announced that I got it fixed on my own and wouldn't be needing his help anymore. I wish I could describe the look on his face, but he was clearly unhappy. I knew after a month that he was never going to call and get it fixed, just to spite me. He literally used his power to do absolutely nothing. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.